Alright, hello everyone, can you hear me? Just a quick test. Cool. Is my volume loud enough? Anyone in the chat? Just let me know if I need to change my volume, like raise or lower it or whatever. Anyway, so I'm here to give a short crash course on how to actually play competitive Pokemon, and essentially I want to teach you how to all completely thrash your friends, and hopefully also make the Dutch local VGC scene slightly less boring, because at the moment there's about 40 odd people which actually play competitively in the Netherlands, of which 30 are garbage, and 10 of them actually compete at the world's level. So honestly, if you practice a little, you could probably be in the top 10 best Pokemon players in the Netherlands, which is pretty cool for bragging rights. Anyway, so first things first. This first hour is going to be about the basics of what competitive Pokemon actually is. It's going to go over like the basic thing, like how do stats work, how do moves work, how do abilities work. So if you're already familiar with all of that, you might want to tune out for the coming hour and come back in a bit when I go into more in-depth, like how you team build and stuff like that. But anyway, first things first, what is competitive Pokemon? Well, competitive Pokemon is a bit of weird as a competitive sport because it's a mix. I'm the best in the Netherlands. I didn't mention that at first because it sounds a bit braggy. But yeah, I competed in the Pokemon World Championships last year, and I'll show off some later. Yeah, best. But I didn't make it to the second stage of the tournament, unfortunately. I got a bit unlucky and also didn't play very well because I'd been on holiday before then. But yeah. I'm currently ranked number 1 in the Netherlands. But anyway, so like competitive Pokemon's kind of weird, and I'm going to say esport, but competitive game, because it's kind of like a mix of chess and poker strategy-wise, where you're kind of having to bluff, read each other, but also like there's a level of strategy. You are just kind of playing to try to manage all your risks, and honestly, you're just trying to work your way to a position where you're trying to maximize the chance that you're going to win. Now, that sounds a bit lame, but it's honestly a lot of fun, and it can be quite addictive, like poker. But I've spent way too much time playing this game when I should be doing calculus or maths, for instance. It's a good way to pass the time and procrastinate. But anyway, so yeah, it's a simultaneously turn-based game, so quite often you might know strategy games where you take one turn, then your opponent takes a turn. No, you take your turns at the same time here. And one of the things I love so much about this game is, well, Pokemon just has so many possibilities, and it's just trying to tackle this, like, endless problem. And trying to figure out what's the best team, what's the best way to play, and everybody gets their own different solution. So it's really creative, and honestly, as a competitive game, it's one of the easiest to pick up. Anybody can get into it if you just put a bit of time into it. It's not like League where you actually have to play for years, or be like some Natural Wonder, or CSGO where you need incredible muscle memory. No, anybody can pick this up, really. Anyway, but what is Pokemon VGC? Well, Pokemon VGC is the official format run by the Pokemon Company International. It's called the Video Game Championships, and each year they hold a World Championships. Competitive Pokemon's played in double battles, not single battles, so lots of you might have played single battles, like in-game, or just maybe online, like random battles or whatever, before. But it works with double battles, and that does have some rather big differences, which I'll get into later. But anyway, so how the format works, you just have 6 Pokemon 6 in a team, which you might be familiar with. You pick 4 of them to bring to the double battle, and then you play using those 4, and the first one to knock out all the other person's Pokemon wins. You're not allowed any duplicate Pokemon. All Pokemon are set to level 50, and how a tournament works, you first have a set number of Swiss rounds. If you don't know what Swiss round is, basically you've got, for instance, say 7 Swiss rounds, you start off, everybody's randomly paired up against each other. The second one, if you won, you get paired against someone else who won. If you lost, you get paired against someone who lost. So you keep on, each round you're paired against somebody who's got the same win-loss record as you, so you play against people at the same level. Now, after so many rounds, the top 8 or top 16, depends on the tournament how large it is, move on to a single elimination bracket to ultimately decide who is the winner. Hey, I'm Mega Mythical Beast. Yeah, live Pokemon tournaments are a lot of fun. This is a photo of me with some friends I've made from literally all over the world. Like, from left to right, we've got someone from Poland, Spain, Portugal, Italy, India, US, Germany, Taiwan, and Singapore. It's quite cool to meet all these people, honestly dorks, like most of us probably are. Also all students, so it's a good crowd. But sadly the entire circuit's kind of been killed by Corona at the moment. Happens, and the Pokemon Company International isn't very good at running an online circuit, but we've got online simulators for that kind of stuff. So we organise our own tournaments at the moment as a community. But yeah, getting into the basics of Pokemon. Well, first things first, you've got typings. So each Pokemon has got its own type. There are 18 different ones of them, and each Pokemon can have one or two of them. Now, typings kind of differentiate Pokemon. Like, certain typings are stronger against other ones. For instance, fire-type moves are better against grass-type Pokemon because they're super effective, and certain types resist other types. For instance, if you use a fire-type move into a water-type Pokemon, you could probably guess it's not going to do as much damage. Also, if you're a fire-type Pokemon and you use a fire-type move, you get what's called a same-type attack bonus, otherwise known as stab, sounds catchier, which gives you just a small boost to your damage output. Certain typings even go so far as to be immune to other types. For instance, if you're a ghost type, nobody can use normal type or fighting type moves against you, just as no damage whatsoever. You can try as much as you want, it's not going to work. And so a super effective move, basically it adds a multiplier of 1.5 times the damage you'd usually do, and the resistant does the opposite, it divides it by 1.5. And to know what's super effective or not, you've got kind of a type chart here. Yeah, Ghost can't type normal types, that's correct, yeah. You've got a type chart here, which basically goes over all the super effective immunities. I'm not going to read them all out because there's too many of them, and honestly, the best way to learn these is just by playing the game, and eventually you'll get the hang of them. I don't think anybody's ever studied a type chart, to be honest. What you do need to pay attention to is some Pokemon have two types. For instance, one might be grass and a fire type, for example. That means you add up the weaknesses and the resistances they have. So, for instance, if you have two types which both resist water, I didn't realise fairy wasn't on the chart. Yeah, well, you can find a better type chart online. That's my bad. But yeah, for instance, if you have two typings that both, for instance, resist water, your move is going to be twice as less effective if you try to use a water move against them. But yeah, that's basically types in a nutshell. Now, a lot of the typings are quite logical. For instance, you've got fire types, so it's super effective against grass. Makes sense, fire's quite destructive, as you see, and water's super effective against fire. Also predictable, and grass somehow absorbs water, is super effective against water. You've got kind of this rock, paper, scissors going on here. But then you've got some weirder types, like you've got dragon type, which you might not expect it, but it loses to fairy types, as being discussed in the chat at the moment. And of course, logically speaking, the best way to deal with fairies is to poison them with poison types. This gets even more confusing when you consider that this thing on the left here, the Galarian Weezing, is a fairy, and that thing on the right, that Pokemon, that's not a dragon. So honestly, really, the best way to learn all these typings is just to search it up mid-battle if you're not already familiar or know them off by heart. There's a really great resource for this called Bulbapedia. If you just type in any Pokemon on Google, honestly, you'll probably find it's one of the highest results, which gives you all the information of all the Pokemon and their weaknesses. So honestly, don't try learning all types by heart. It's not worth the effort. You'll pick it up as you play. And then each Pokemon, besides its type, also has some stats. Now, each Pokemon has 6 different stats, each giving its own strength and weaknesses. Now, the base stats of a Pokemon are the same per species, so every Charizard has these base stats, what's shown on the screen right now. Then there's also secondary values called effort values and individual values, which sounds complicated but really isn't. But basically, I'll go into them more in depth, but you can train your Pokemon to raise a certain stat of your choice. Individual values are set when you catch a Pokemon, so some Pokemon, when you catch them, just naturally have better stats than others, even within the same species. Now, a stat can change, like, depending on the Pokemon's base stats, its effort values, individual values, as you mentioned, and its level. So level 100 Pokemon, of course, has higher stats than level 50 Pokemon. In VGC, all Pokemon are level 50, so that's what's most important to us. Stats really impact the viability of a Pokemon, whether you can actually use it or not in competitive play, because let's say it's got terrible defenses and terrible attack, you're not going to want to use it, you're going to want to pick something which has better stats. So there is a limited pool of Pokemon which you want to use. You can't, for instance, use Pikachu because it just wouldn't do much, but it's a pretty broad pool, particularly in the current meta, which I'll get into later. Anyway, so the first stat is HP and special defense and defense. There are two types of defense. HP is your Pokemon's available health, and when you run out of health, your Pokemon is knocked out. A lot would say killed, but that's not kid-friendly, and therefore Game Freak cannot say that. But regardless, you cannot use bag items in a battle like you could in, like, if you've ever played one of the Pokemon main games. So you might use a potion mid-battle to heal up in, like, a really particularly difficult fight. But you cannot do that in competitive Pokemon. The only way you can heal a Pokemon is through its moves, or maybe even items which you've given it. And then you've got defense and special defense, which are both quite straightforward. Defense lowers the amount of HP you lose when somebody uses a physical attack against you, and special defense does the opposite. It lowers the amount of HP you lose when somebody uses a special attack against you. Now, those are two types of attacks, which I'll get into later, but that's essentially your defensive stats. These are what keep your Pokemon living and alive. Then you get the special attack and damage. Attack increases the amount of damage you basically do with physical attacks resisted by defense, as I just said, and special attack does, once again, like its counterpart, it increases the amount of damage you do with special attacks, which is once again resisted by special defense. It's quite straightforward. Now, you do have to keep in mind each attack in Pokemon, for whatever reason, has a 6.25, 1 in 16 chance to have a critical hit, and a critical hit increases your damage by 1.5 times, I believe, and it also means you ignore any boost the opposing Pokemon has, which can be pretty big, because let's say you're against somebody who's just sitting there using defense boosting moves and you're defensive. You don't have the firepower to break through it or get rid of his boost. Now you get lucky after a while, you crit him, you just kill him in one shot, you make him very angry, but you've won your game. That's what we call outplayed and skilled. Pokemon also has a really complicated damage formula, which you don't need to know, because we've got damage calculators for that kind of stuff. If you just Google damage calculator, I'll give you one later as well. For Pokemon, you'll find one. For each different Pokemon, it'll calculate the amount of damage you can do with certain moves and certain stats. It is ridiculously long, and somebody's literally wrote a thesis on this thing. I won't go into it, but yeah, just letting you know that exists. Anyway, so then the final stat, speed. Now this is one of the most important stats when it comes to your Pokemon, because speed determines the order in which your Pokemon are going to move on the field. You've got 4 Pokemon, and the fastest one is going to go first, usually. Now certain moves can boost or lower the speed of your Pokemon, of your opponent, and this is quite important for VGC, because this lets you control who moves when. Now of course you want to be moving before your opponent does at all times, because that gives you a slight advantage. Now, something changed with speed between early generations and the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield, where speed is now calculated mid-turn. Now, what does that mean? For instance, if you use a speed boosting move mid-turn, then if your partner hasn't already moved yet and it now outspeeds, you'll now outspeed your opponent's Pokemon mid-turn, right? When it used to be you use a speed boosting move, even if you were to now outspeed your opponent mid-turn, you wouldn't actually outspeed them until the following turn. It might sound a bit confusing, but I'll cover it again later on. But yeah, so speed is a very important mechanic in competitive Pokemon, and moving first allows you to potentially, for instance, kill an opposing Pokemon before they get a move off. Regieleki is also, as Mega Mythical Beast has just said, some crazy Pokemon they released in the latest DLC with base 200 speed, which, for those which don't know what that means, is a lot, and it outspeeds everything in the game, even outspeeds most Pokemon with their speed doubled, and it's frankly ridiculous, but it's fun. Next up, moves. Moves are quite important to your Pokemon, because without them you're not going to be doing much. You've got your stats, but you've got to dish damage somehow. Now, there are 3 types of moves: physical, special, and status moves. Physical and special moves do damage. Status moves kind of manipulate the board in a way. They basically don't do damage, they introduce other effects. Every move has a base power and BP. Now, base power is basically the rough amount of damage. Like, the higher the base power, the more damage your move does. It's that simple. And PP is the amount of times you can click that move. For instance, if you've got 8 BP on a move, you can only use that move 8 times before you can't click that move anymore. Now, PP doesn't come into effect very often in double battles because they tend to be shorter, but in single battles you might have situations where 2 people are kind of borrowing, like switching about the entire time, just stalling out each other's PP. But yeah, they do exist. A lot of moves also have secondary effects, some of which you can see in the moves listed on the screen right now. So, for instance, you can see that Flare Blitz has a 10% chance to burn your target. I'll get into what a burn is later. But lots of moves have secondary effects, and these can be quite important depending on the move and how likely they are to happen. So a lot of moves have accuracy. For instance, Hydro Pump is listed there. If you click Hydro Pump, there's only an 80% chance you're going to hit it, which sounds okay, but if you consider that maybe in a tournament you're going to be clicking that move 10 to 20 times, you're probably going to miss 3 of them, and that can be quite crucial. Or you can get really lucky and just miss 5 in a row like some people, and people have lost tournaments like that. So there is something to be said for picking accurate moves over inaccurate moves, even if they are weaker, particularly in tournament setting. And finally, there's typing, as I said. Fire-type moves are stronger against Grass-type Pokemon, because Grass is weak to Fire. And also, moves can target different Pokemon. Flare Blitz and Hydro Pump are what we call single-target moves. They target a single Pokemon, but Earthquake is called a spread move. Every single Pokemon on the field, all 3 of the other ones beyond the one using it, are going to get damaged by it. Yeah, so special attacks are boosted. Like, you do more damage with special attacks if you've got a high special attack. You do more damage with physical attacks with high attack, as said by Mega the Mystic Beast. So I pity you, QQ vs U. Anyway, so next up, Status moves. Status moves manipulate the playing field, and a really famous abuser of them is Whimsicott, and you'll see more of Whimsicott later into this course. Basically, status moves, for instance, they can do a few things. For instance, they can boost or lower your stats, so you've got status moves which boost your attack, so after you've boosted your attack, you can now click a move and do even more damage. Or you can lower your opponent's stats, so you, for instance, lower their attack, they do less damage. They can also induce status effects, such as Burn, Poison, Paralyze, Sleep, Freeze, Confuse, or Infatuation, which I'll explain what they do later, but they are nasty effects which you'd rather have on the enemy side of the field than your own. They can bend the rules of the game, and some really important examples for competitive Pokemon are Tailwind. Tailwind, when you click it, for the next 3 turns, all your Pokemon have doubled speed, allowing you to outrun and move before other Pokemon. Trick Room does the opposite. The slowest Pokemon moves first for 4 turns in a row. So now all the slow Pokemon are suddenly the fast Pokemon, and that can shake up a game quite heavily. Protect is a really important move because you can just click it when you expect somebody to attack you and you want to keep your Pokemon alive, and it just nullifies all damage. Are there any Pokemon immune to water? Yes, there are. Some abilities give you immunity to water, but there aren't any typings immune to water. I'll go over abilities in a bit. Can come back to that. And the final one is Taunt. Taunt will basically stop your opponent from using status moves to try and interfere with your game plan. So basically, if you don't want to be dealing with that stuff, you just want to be clicking attacks, keep the game nice and simple, you run that. So yeah, that's status moves. And moves can also have priority. Now, this isn't all too difficult, might sound a bit complicated, but basically higher priority moves always move first. So for instance, you've got Extreme Speed. If you click Extreme Speed, it's always going to move first as a move, regardless of everything else. Sucker Punch also has slightly higher priority, so it'll move before other moves as well, but after Extreme Speed. And then you also have some moves, such as Trick Room and Roar, which have lower priority and therefore always move last. That's it, really. There's not much more to that. And as mentioned before, you've got the spread damage. So I mentioned that Pokemon can attack multiple Pokemon at once through the use of certain moves. Now, 2 really big examples of this are Earthquake and Rock Slide, which this Pokemon Landorus is very good at using, and is also commonly found running it. Now, spread moves that attack multiple Pokemon are called spread moves, as I said, and one thing to keep in mind, the main thing to take from this, is that spread moves do 25% less damage if they're targeting multiple Pokemon. However, if you knock out one of the two Pokemon on the enemy side of the field, and your attacking Pokemon is now only targeting one Pokemon, you don't get the damage debuff. It's just something to keep in mind, and it comes into play occasionally, particularly when Pokemon like Landorus are in play. So yeah, that's mostly stats, that's the basic ones, and the moves, how they function. You've then got Nature's EVs and IVs, and this is where you can start to customize your own Pokemon. Nature's basically boost one stat and lower another by 10% each. Now, if you can breed your Pokemon to have the nature that you want, to boost the stat you want, and lower a stat you don't really need, you can sort of train your Pokemon in a way that you want it to. Effort values do the same. You can give, it's like kind of, in an RPG when you get points and you can invest them to increase like some of your stats, and you can choose how you spread them over different stats. It's like that. You can train your Pokemon to, for instance, have more attack or more speed, but you've got a limited number of points you can invest, and you have to choose how you distribute them. Individual values range from 0 to 31 and are decided when you catch Pokemon. Now, this might completely be going over your head. I'm going to give you some examples to make it a bit more concrete in seconds, so bear with me. But basically, yeah, you could choose, for instance, do you want your Pokemon to be tankier, absorb more hits, do you want it to be faster and hit harder? These are choices which you can make in competitive Pokemon. I'm going to give you an example with Charizard. So here you see Charizard has got 31 IVs and everything but attack. Why it's got less in attack isn't very relevant for now, but 31 IVs is the max amount you want, and generally when you catch a Pokemon you want 31 IVs in every single stat. That's the perfect Pokemon, and it's quite tedious to get in game, as Mega the Mythical Beast is pointing out there. But regardless, let's say you've got your perfect Charizard. This one, you've invested it in speed. We've given it a nature which gives it 10% more speed. You can see the little plus sign there, and minus 10% on the attack, because we're a special attacker, we're going to use special attacking moves, we're not going to use any physical attacks, we don't need the attack. So this Charizard is very fast, and as you can see, our points have been invested in speed and special attack, so it's going to be fast, and it's going to hit hard. Now, take a look at this Charizard. You'll notice that we've now got 0 IVs in speed, and we've also used a nature to lower that stat. It is a lot slower than the last Charizard, which I'll go back to here. You see, this one's got 167 stat and speed. This one's got 94. It's almost the half of that. But yeah, we've invested instead in HP and defense. So this Charizard, although it won't hit as hard and it won't be as fast, it will live a lot more hits. And you can use that for different strategies in the game, basically. So yeah, now we get to the abilities, and this is where stuff also starts to get a bit more interesting. So every Pokemon has an ability which has a different effect. There are too many of them to name. Basically, when you catch a Pokemon, you just open up a summary and it'll tell you what the ability does. So it's all quite self-explanatory, usually. But some of the most important abilities for competitive Pokemon I'll go over is Intimidate. Now, you might have seen Intimidate on some Pokemon if you played it in the game and always thought this is kind of useless, but it's actually really, really powerful when used correctly. Intimidate basically lowers the attack of both of your opposing enemy's Pokemon every time you switch that Pokemon in, meaning they do less damage to both you and your partner, which, of course, is quite helpful. Then you've got abilities such as Sand Rush, Swift Swim, and Chlorophyll. Now, these are called weather abilities. They double the Pokemon's speed when they're in the respective weather. Now, Sand Rush in Sandstorm, Swift Swim in Rain, and Chlorophyll in Sun. You can see 3 examples of weather abusers here, with Excadrill, Ludicolo, and Venusaur are 3 of the most well-known weather abusers whose abilities let them move faster when their specific weather is up. And then you've also got Defiant and Prankster. Now, Defiant basically just boosts your attack every time somebody tries to lower one of your stats. So let's say somebody's got Intimidate, they switched in, but you've got your Defiant Pokemon. Your Defiant Pokemon might lose 1 attack, but then it gains 2, so it actually gains overall. It basically scares off your opponent from trying to lower your stats. And Prankster is the final ability I want to go over. All those status moves I mentioned earlier, and you remember priority? Prankster gives every single status move that Pokemon uses priority, meaning it usually always moves first. And that lets you do some tricky things. Now, if you might have remembered that fluffy cloud Pokemon called Whimsicott earlier, that gets Prankster, and you're going to see it again in a bit. Now, a few other things when it comes to basic things with Pokemon. So, every Pokemon can only hold one item. Every Pokemon can only hold one item, and each item has a different effect or ability on that Pokemon and the game, essentially. Now, some of the most important items are berries. You can give them, and there are many different types. Some berries are as simple as if you're below 50% HP, you gain a little bit. Lets your Pokemon hang around a little longer. Other ones remove status effects, for instance, you're burned. You've got a Lumberry, you're no longer burned. Quite nice. You've also got things known as super effective berries. If you're hit by a super effective move of a specific type, let's say like your Charizard, you're scared of rock type moves, you give it a Charty berry, which lowers the damage of rock type super effective moves. It halves the damage, meaning your Charizard might live what it otherwise wouldn't have. Then you've got some other quite important items such as the Focus Sash, Life Orb, Choice Items, Weakness Policy. A Focus Sash is simply put, it's the little red ribbon you can see in the top right there. Focus Sash, what it essentially does, if you were to be knocked out in one hit, a one-hit KO. I'll get to that question in a second for you. And no, you cannot see items of the opponent, but you can generally learn what they are throughout a game. I'll get to that in a second. The Focus Sash, if you were to be one-hit KO'd by a move, let's say you took a super effective hit you really shouldn't have, and it would have knocked your Pokemon out in one go, 100-0. Focus Sash leaves you on 1 HP. You get one more chance. Life Orb just boosts your damage a little, but each time you click a move, you lose a little bit of HP. But it's a worthy trade-off if you want to just get that extra oomph. Choice Items give one stat, can either be speed, attack, or special attack. A 1.5 times boost, which is significant, but they only let you click one move until you switch out. So you click that move, you're locked into that move. And finally, there's the weakness policy. If you're hit by a super effective move, but you're secretly quite a tanky Pokemon, you can take a lot of hits. It doubles your attack and special attack, which is crazy. It lets you do some really weird stuff where you can make some really bulky Pokemon, and maybe even super effectively attack yourself to suddenly go on a rampage. Now, you can't, answering Basvi's question there, you cannot see what items your opponent has in-game, but unless the item gets used. For instance, when an enemy Pokemon eats a berry, you see it eat the berry. You know it's got the berry now. Now, that's not relevant for that game, but usually you play this game in best of 3, so for next game, you know that Pokemon's got a berry. Now, for instance, if they've got a Life Orb and you see them lose a little bit of HP, you know they've got a Life Orb, and you can probably tell by the extra damage they're doing. So, although you can't know at the start of the battle what they have, you can kind of deduce by paying attention to what's happening to their Pokemon. And also, having so many random attributes make the game fairly random. How do you prevent tilt? There aren't actually that many random attributes in Pokemon. The most frustrating one has got to be critical hits, just 1 in 16 chance to do a fair bit of extra damage for no reason. But in the end, Pokemon has proven to be quite a consistent game where I can't remember who, but there was an analyst for instance, Hearthstone, which is considered an esports by some. A professional Hearthstone player will win roughly 55% of the games against any random given other player. Now, for Pokemon, if you're really good at Pokemon, your win ratio against any other given player can go up to 80%, meaning that 20% of your games are just going to be lost out of something completely out of your hands. And an 80% win ratio is high for a lot of games. Like, I'm pretty sure you can't reach that, for instance, in games such as League either, but that's a team-based game, it's a different type of... but yeah, there is some random elements, but the entire game is based around how you control them. Anyway, so next moving on to status effects. I mentioned them a little earlier. So you've got a few status effects, but they're quite simple, quite easy to remember, and they make sense for what they are. Each Pokemon can only have one status effect, with the exception of Confusion and Infatuation. So you can't be burned and poisoned at the same time. That would be quite sad for your Pokemon. But Paralysis halves your speed, makes you slower, you're paralyzed, you can't move as quickly, and gives you a 25% chance to be fully paralyzed and not do an attack at all for a turn. Now, the speed you can live with, but that 1 in 4 chance to just not do anything can really suck. So you want to avoid getting paralyzed as much as possible. Burns halve your attack, which is huge if you're a physical attacker. It means you're doing half as much damage, and also hurt your HP a little by 1 in 16, like 1/16th per turn. And then you've also got Poison, which does slightly more, takes away 1/8 of your HP each turn. And there is an extreme form of poison, which we call badly poisoned, which you can only get from the move Toxic. And if you're badly poisoned, the damage ramps up each turn. So the first turn you might take 1/8, but the next you're going to take 1/4 to 1/2, and then if you stay on the field long enough, you might end up losing all of your HP bar in one go. So generally, you don't want that to happen. And it's a really good way to beat out teams which have got bulkier Pokemon which you can take down with regular moves. Some more status effects are Sleep. It causes a Pokemon to be unable to attack for 1 to 3 turns, which is random, and this is a bit of a weird one, because if you wake up after the first turn of not being able to take an attack, that's of course a lot better for you than just not being able to actually click anything for 3 turns long. Freeze is by far the worst and the least competitive of the status. Luckily, however, this status cannot be induced by anything other than random secondary effects, so when it happens, it really sucks. Basically, you cannot attack until you thaw. You only have a 20% chance to thaw every turn. And this can go on forever. You can see how this could get quite frustrating. Luckily, there is no move you can just click to now freeze your opponent. Some ice type moves have, for instance, 10% chance to freeze your enemy, and when it happens, it can be game changing. Anyway, you've got 2 others. Confusion. It gives your Pokemon a 30% chance to hit itself. Yeah, freeze is Sleep, but better. Essentially, yeah. Confusion gives yourself a 30% chance to hit itself in Confusion and not be able to attack that turn at the same time. The higher your attack is, the more damage you do to yourself. So this allows for some interesting situations where, for instance, if you've boosted your attack a lot, you get confused. Now you're going to do a lot more damage to yourself if you hit yourself in that 30% chance of confusion. So you need to avoid that. And Infatuation doesn't come into play much. There's one move called Attract, which can induce it. Basically, if you attract a Pokemon of the opposite gender, there's just 50% chance that they're not going to be attacked that turn. But since genders are decided at the start of the battle, it's kind of random, and it's not a very consistent move to run, which is why you don't see a lot. What's the percentage chance to wake up from sleep? I don't know that off by heart, but I believe it's like, I think it's larger than 20%. It's something around 30 to 40, but you'd have to check that one and not quote me on it. So yeah, that's all the status effects. You've then also got some field effects. Field effects basically add an additional modifier to all Pokemon on the field. Now, if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh, you might know them as some of the rooms and trains. Now, 4 of the most well-known ones are the weathers. You might have seen these in the base game. Whoops, didn't mean to click that. You've got Sun, Rain, Hail, and Sandstorm. Now, Sun, what it does, it boosts the power of all Fire-type moves and lowers the damage of all Water-type moves. That's it, nothing more. Rain does the opposite. Boosts all the Water-type moves, and instead lowers the damage of all the Fire-type moves. Hail doesn't do anything of the sorts, it just damages every Pokemon by 1/16 of their health per turn, unless you're an Ice or Steel type. Sandstorm is slightly more interesting. It damages everything, except for Steel and Rock types, by 1/16 every turn. Sorry, excuse me. It also raises the special defense of all rock types by 1 stage, which is something not many people know, so rock types actually become bulkier when sand is up. I'm not sure why ground types aren't immune to Sandstorm. It doesn't make much sense, but it is the case, I believe. I might be wrong on that one, though. You've also got terrains. So you've got Grassy, Electric, Psychic, and Misty Terrain. They're quite straightforward. Grassy Terrain boosts Grass-type moves. It also lowers the power of the Earthquake, but that's about it. Electric type just boosts the power of electric type moves, makes sense. It also prevents all Pokemon from falling asleep. That's useful. You've also got Psychic Terrain, which boosts the power of all Psychic moves, and it stops all priority moves. So you know that Extreme Speed I mentioned earlier? You cannot click that in Psychic Terrain. And you've got Misty Terrain, which is considered by some to be the worst terrain. It doesn't boost anything. It does halve the damage of Dragon-type moves for whatever random reason, and it also stops all status effects from being used on any Pokemon which is grounded. So that can be useful, for instance, if you don't want your Pokemon to fall asleep and they've got something which is trying to put you to sleep. The final ones are rooms, of which there's 3. Trick Room, Magic Room, and Wonder Room. A Trick Room is one I mentioned earlier. The slowest Pokemon moves first, and the fastest moves last. So it allows your slow Pokemon suddenly become Turbo. Magic Room swaps your... Magic Room makes the effects of all items nullified, so any item that's being held by any Pokemon in the game just won't do anything anymore for 4 turns. And Wonder Room swaps everybody's special defense and defense, which doesn't happen all too often. Now, Torkoal gets the ability Drought, which sets up the sun. So you could, for instance, use this with Venusaur, the Pokemon which gets doubled speed in Sun, to make quite a nasty combo together, because you can have him set up the Sun. Venusaur is now very fast, and then they can both start blasting away. Now you can see where this is going. Finally, you've got 2 more concepts in competitive Pokemon. These are Dynamax and Gigantamax. These were introduced in Sword and Shield, and they are this generation's gimmick. People kind of split in opinion on whether they like them or don't like them. I'm personally on the side that I don't like them much. I can explain why later, but I'm just going to quickly go over how they work. You've probably seen them in the game, but you might not know everything that they actually do. So Dynamax makes Pokemon both chunky and much stronger, and quite literally chunkier, because the Pokemon become huge in-game. Yeah, Primal, Groudon and Kyogre currently aren't in Sword and Shield, which is why I haven't covered them, because they're not relevant for competitive Pokemon at the moment. But they do have an ability which is a different type of weather, but I didn't cover them because they're not in... You can't use legendaries and they're not in the game. And Mega Evolutions are not a thing in Sword and Shield, they're removed alongside C moves. So that's why I've also not covered them. But yeah, so now you've got Dynamax Pokemon, and you can Dynamax Pokemon once per battle, and it lasts 3 turns. And it makes your Pikachu, a very large Pikachu for instance, and Dynamax Pokemon have doubled HP, are immune to flinching, and the moves generally get increased power. So this kind of sounds whack, and it kind of is. Dynamax moves all become single target, so for instance if you use a Dynamax Earthquake, it becomes a single target ground move. It no longer does spread damage. And if your opposing Pokemon uses Protect, you still do 25% of your damage through that Protect, so that can be really big. And there are certain scenarios where Pokemon is so weak to a certain type that even though they click Protect, you can use a Dynamax move to hit them, and even though your damage was quartered, you still one-hit KO them clean, which is quite sad and mildly overpowered. Regardless, all Saturn moves become Max Protect, which blocks everything, including the damage through Protect from Dynamax moves, which you'd usually have. So it's just slightly better than Protect. And Max moves also all boost a certain stat, depending on their type. They boost either you and your partner's stat, or they lower the stats of both of your opposing enemy Pokemon. Now, the most interesting ones for competitive are Max Fly, which raises your speed and your partner's speed. Now, as you remember, speed control is a pretty big deal, because you want to move first. Now, being able to raise both your speeds comes in very useful, because you're able to outspeed your opposing Pokemon attack first, and get the damage off before they are. Max Fighting increases your attack stat for both Pokemon on your side of the field, so just lets you do more damage, also quite nice. Max Ghost lowers the defense stat of both the opposing Pokemon, essentially the same as Max Fighting, except if your opposing enemy switches out, they of course lose the status buff, debuff in this case. So that's why it's used slightly less than Max Fighting, but it's still quite a useful move to have around. Max Steel boosts your defense, lets you take more physical hits, and Max Ground does the opposite, boosts your special defense and lets you take more special hits. Now, every type does a different thing, and I'm not going to go over them all. You can probably, if you Google them, you can find them quite easily. Typhlosion can be quite good if you just click Eruption, because that's a ridiculously powerful move, but I haven't used it much personally. Hello world. Thanks for joining there. Yeah, then you've got Gigantamax. So Gigantamax, because Dynamax wasn't enough, Game Freak decided we need more, and they added Gigantamax. Gigantamax are a special kind of Dynamax, which gets even more abilities on top of what they already received. For instance, the Pikachu from the last slide wasn't actually a Dynamax Pikachu, it was Gigantamax, and as you can see, this Venusaur has now become a Gigantamax Venusaur. It looks slightly different to what its usual self is. So, as said, some Pokemon get this special Gigantamax form, and basically all it does, one type of move they use, for instance for Venusaur, it becomes grass-type moves. They're slightly stronger than non-Gigantamax Pokemon's Dynamax moves, and they also all get a secondary effect. There are so many secondary effects, I'm not going to cover them all here, but if you Google Gigantamax Pokemon, you can find a nice list online, for instance on Bulbapedia, the website I mentioned before, which goes over all of them for you. So yeah, this is a lot of information that I've just kind of crashed onto you all. The idea is, like, you'll be able to rewatch this recording if you want to later, but Pokemon is a game that is really best learned playing. There is a lot, and the best way to memorize it is just literally by playing, and eventually you get a feel for it. I haven't memorized all the type charts, for instance. I've just played enough that I know what's super effective against what, because it's just come through experience. I hope that you'll understand the basic concepts after this introduction course. And there are a lot of Pokemon moves, abilities, and items, and you really cannot memorize them all. It's, once again, I stress, it's really not worth trying to do so. It won't improve your skill by much. Hello World 543, I'll get to that in a second. Yeah, so the goal was this was to introduce you to most of the game's core mechanics, and with this you'll know enough for the next part where I'm going to introduce you how do you make your own teams, and even better, how to win with those teams and keep improving. So yeah, basically the main way to learn the basic concepts is just really play the game and pay a bit of attention to what's going on, and you can stick around for a bit more in-depth stuff. Now I'm going to go ahead and just answer any questions from the chat, which you may have. Now give me a second. Alright, so Hello World 543 just asked, can you dig and wait for it to pass? I assume you mean the Gigantamax. You can. One of the best strategies when your opponent Dynamaxes is to just not deal with it. You can click Protect, lower the amount of damage they're doing, or click Dig. Just avoid their attacks entirely. That's one really way to get around it. Is there music? Oh, give me a second. Sorry, my Spotify had a shared account, so the other person had turned something on in the meanwhile, which I hadn't realised. Can you hear me now? Alright, sorry for deafening you all. You're welcome. Well, at least the music works. But yeah, so okay, so somebody was asking, what's your favourite team strategy combination? Now, the format for Pokemon changes each year, so it depends year by year what my favourite strategies are, and I can go over some of like the strategies which I like most. But for instance, last year was interesting. It was 2019. It was also my first year of properly competing. I'd played online before, but never actually in live tournaments. And one thing you could do, the format was built that you're allowed to use 2 legendaries, only 2 on a team of 6, and so I really liked using this Pokemon called Xerneas, which you may know. It's this fairy type. It's like a kind of deer type Pokemon. Let's see if I can go grab an image of it. Let's see. So yeah, here you go. This is Xerneas. You might recognize it. But yeah, so Xerneas gets this move called Geomancy. When you click Geomancy, it boosts your special attack by 2 times, your special defense by 2 times, and your speed by 2 times. Which is crazy, because it's a legendary, and you just doubled half of its important stats, and then you just go on a slight rampage. Primal Groudon's also a lot of fun, because it's just one of the most overpowered broken Pokemon in the game. So this legendary format was very high firepower, but other strategies which are good fun are playing slower teams, where you try to poison all the opposing team's Pokemon, or like weather-based teams, where you try to set up the weather and overrun them using your weather Pokemon. There's lots of different ways you can go about it. Julius here, I'll try to get this downloaded so I can post it somewhere for the Intraland Pokemon tournament, yeah. Alright, so next question. How much do stat total matter? That really, really depends. So stat totals in terms of, it depends on what you want the Pokemon to do. So Pokemon with higher stats, generally speaking, tend to be more viable. that's not always the case, because there are some Pokemon which have crazy total stats, but they're completely useless because they don't have the right moves to exploit it. Or for instance, their speed is way too low, therefore they can't actually get a move in to do what they want to do. Or for instance, maybe they've got crazy stats and it's all in attack and speed, so you just kind of sneeze on it and it dies. It's not very helpful. Kind of like a glass cannon. So base stats do matter. Like, if they're too low, you're not going to be doing much, but a lot of Pokemon with quite low base stats have seen usage. Like, some really good examples are Clefairy. Clefairy is an amazing supportive Pokemon which can redirect moves using a move called Follow Me. And other low HP. People have actually used Pikachu somehow and made it work before. I'm not quite sure how they did it, but it's seen usage before. So yeah. And should you care about EVs? Definitely. So EVs, I didn't go into the technicalities, but every 8 EVs you put into a Pokemon gives you 1 stat point. Now you can put 252 into a stat, which gives you, God, I've got to do maths now, calculator. About 31 extra stat points. It rounds up, so 32. Now, 32 stats, you can do that for 2 separate stats, so you can add up to 64 stats to a Pokemon, which can make the difference between being able to knock something out or just completely not being able to kill it in one shot, or being able to live something or outspeed something. So EVs are quite important for a tournament. Thankfully, Sword and Shield has made it quite easy, and if you Google guides on how to EV train Pokemon, it's quite straightforward these days. It might take you a few hours to get going, but it's quite doable. It's allowed to use TMs for tournaments. Yes, every move which a Pokemon can learn in Sword and Shield can be used in tournaments. However, if it learnt it in a prior generation but no longer learns it in Sword and Shield, you cannot use that move. Every competitive Pokemon player had a Kyogre at some point. Yeah, Kyogre was quite a menace. I used it briefly as well. I'll show you a bit later where I can grab it now. I played my first tournament in Frankfurt. I was using Xerneas Groudon. I can show you that. It was quite funny. I ended up losing because I did the classic miss of Precipice Blades. A one-hit KO is common in tournaments. Not very common. Depends on the format. Some are slower, bulkier. Some are more hyper-offensive. This one, Dynamax has slowed down the number of one-hit KOs because doubling your HP makes it very hard to one-hit KO a Pokemon. So yeah, let me quickly go find the... Let's get this up. Alright, so this is an example of a Pokemon match which I was in. So like, this was when it was still played on the DS. So you can see the teams that are being used, like, that's kind of what they looked like last year. So you can see Groudon and Xerneas was pretty popular back then, but a Kyogre became more popular later on because it's quite good at beating Groudon. So yeah. Any more questions? There is definitely a clear-cut metagame of the Pokemon, and the next part will go into also how you know which Pokemon are viable. I didn't consider that intro information, but there is a really useful website called Pikalytics, which if you want to Google it already, Pikalytics shows you the current usage stats in the current format, so you can see what Pokemon are the most used at the moment, and also which ones are therefore viable. And sure, if you want to battle me on Pokemon Showdown, I'm down to do it. Do you have any format in mind? Ooh, haven't played Gen 3. Bass, Dig doesn't get used often because the problem with Dig is when you've used it, you are immune for a turn, but it does guarantee your opponent knows what you're going to do the next turn, so they might be able to click Protect to just stop all the damage coming from it. Anything goes national decks, oh god. Gen 4 is I think Gen 5 is my favourite generation, I've got to say. I know that's an unpopular opinion. Anything that isn't Generation 6, honestly, X and Y. Typolosion can be fun. Wait, I'll share my screen and I can show you how you could build Typolosion. So... Alright, so... This is Pokemon Showdown. This is what it looks like at the moment. So... oh dear. I don't have a team. Where can I find a team to use as like a sample team for that? Mega Mythical Beast. But yeah, like you were talking about Typlosion. So I don't think Typlosion is actually in Sword and Shield yet, so you wouldn't be able to use it right now, but in the past what you could do with it, for instance, I'll change it to VGC 20. Oh, that was last year, I need 19, where is it? There you go. You're not allowed to use legendaries at the moment, so Arceus doesn't fare at all. Also, Arceus isn't allowed to be used because it's a mythical, an event Pokemon, so it's never been allowed to been used. Also, Ash is a terrible competitive Pokemon player, so I wouldn't trust his word for anything. Kyurem. Oh, the Sword Shield starters come released. I'll get into that in a second, but first, like, somebody was talking about Typlosion. So the way you could use him, because he's a fire type, he gets this really powerful move, Eruption. Does less power if you've got less HP, but, like, the idea is, you want to move first, so you just maximize your speed. You click Eruption, and you just hit things really, really freaking hard. But the Sword and Shield starters have actually all been used now. So Cinderace was really cool for a while, because Cinderace basically, it's really fast, and it's got really good attack stat, but it gets this crazy ability called Libero. The Pokemon's type changes into the type of the move which it's about to use, meaning you can change your resists, but at the same time, if you remember the same type of attack bonus, if you use a move which is the same type as you are, you get an attack boost, so it gets that for every single move it clicks, which allows for some pretty crazy offensive stuff. You then have Rillaboom, which is the Sword and Shield monkey, and this gets Grassy Surge, which is cool. It basically boosts all its own grassy type moves, but it's got this cool move called what do you call it? Need to change it back to VGC 21. Grassy Glide, which gets priority when in Grassy Terrain, which it sets itself and boosts by itself, so it can do a lot of damage that way. And the last one, Inteleon, has also seen a bit of use, not anymore. It's kind of dropped off, but it was like a really fast, quite hard-hitting water-type Pokemon, which was, for a while in the Pokemon, it had a bit of a niche. So they've all seen use, actually. All the starters have been viable at some point this year, which was pretty cool. Speed Boost Blaziken was your boy. Blaziken used to be crazy. He's been robbed of his Mega Form, though, so he just does a lot less damage now. So he's just not as good. He's also not in the game. No, Cinderace is Greninja, yeah, which gets a similar ability, but much worse. It's actually got the moves to abuse the ability. All right. Any other questions before we go to a break? A pseudo-legendary Pokemon allowed. What do you mean by pseudo-legend? Do you mean like Landorus? Or do you mean Pokemon with 600 stats? Mega Mythical Beast, I don't have a team at the moment. If you can send me somewhere, like, I can find a sample team, I'll definitely make sure to do so. Can you see? Okay, you can see me. 600 stats, yeah, they're all allowed. There's no cap on stats. Alright, so... I'll just throw a quick game here. My team's slightly outdated, but This team I've got here, let me show you what's on it. So it's basically got Raichu, Moltres, Katana, Tapu Fini, Cresselia, and Sakataka, and just show a quick game of here. So, this is not your average team, but here goes anyway. So I'll talk through some of the tricks this team has because it's actually quite fun and it's quite funny. So Moltres got the weakness policy. That's an item I mentioned earlier, which boosts your attack if you get hit by a super effective move. Now what you can do is Dynamax, so you take less damage, then Volt Switch in yourself with Raichu, hitting yourself with a super effective move, and boosting your attack. And Sakataka is literally a pile of bricks. Google it. That's not an exaggeration. That is just what it is. It's a bit weird, to be honest. Anyway. We're both Dynamaxing off the bat. So that's going to be up for 3 turns. I'm going to lower his Regigigas attack because that's his main damage dealer. As you see, he does absolutely nothing as a result. A pile of bricks isn't a ground type move. There isn't actually a move called pile of bricks. Unfortunately, that would be a good name for a move. So yeah, this is going to be a slow game because he's just got a very fat, thick Pokemon, which I just critical hit. That's nice. Okay, so he's knocked out my Raichu, but I'm still in a pretty good spot because as you see, what I mentioned, some moves lower raise speed. As you can see here, I've lowered his speed on both sides, so I'm now actually going to be faster with whatever I choose to bring in. So, although this looks like a bit of a strange position, I now do actually have the upper hand. So I'm just going to continue to keep doing that and beat this poor person up. Can I zoom in a bit? Sure. Just getting some damage off, and from here onwards we're just going to be playing to clean him up. Oh, actually I can't actually see my attacks now. There we go. Yeah, so there's not much my opponent can do at this point in the game. He's in a bit of a pickle. He's just trying to juggle around to regain a position. I don't think he's going to succeed very well. So what I'm doing here, I'm clicking Protect because I expect his Urshifu to try and attack my Moltres. Because my Moltres is the main thing which is scaring him at the moment. So what I'm doing is I'm switching out to something which can threaten his Urshifu, protecting it. I'm an idiot though because I forgot while streaming. Urshifu's got an ability which ignores Protect, so you just watch me throw the game live. I still think I win this though, ultimately. Yeah, I think I've got the advantage here. Tapu Fini might be able to 1v1 this. No, I'm just washed up and also multitasking, so but this man is also throwing little. So I just boosted my Tapu Fini stat, like with a status move as I mentioned, boosted special attack, special defense, so he's now dealing less damage to me. All I have to do is now try and kill him, as he very slowly tries to kill me, and I just do more damage than he does at the moment. So that's essentially how this game is going to go. I just keep clicking Muddy Water, hope I don't miss because it's 85% accurate. Oh, he just got a secondary effect which lowers my special defense, which is a shame. But yeah. Oh, there we go. I won. But yeah, Urshifu, like as I mentioned, abilities, they do different things. Urshifu's got this crazy broken ability where even if you click Protect, his move will go through it. And he's also got some crazy base stats in the game, so yeah. That's competitive Pokemon at a low level, and I almost lost that, so I wasn't doing a very good show as one of the best players in the Netherlands. But yeah, that's all for now. I will be back in like 50 minutes or so and show you how to make your own teams and how to like also play like this and what you need to be keeping in mind and how to improve and get involved really. So I'll see you around in a bit. Alright. Now? Great. Alright, so moving on with the second part of the competitive Pokemon 101, and this is the one which people who haven't played Pokemon before will find a bit more interesting. So basically, I'm going to go over a few things with this one, and the first is going to be how you actually build a Pokemon team, because it's all nice and good to know the mechanics of Pokemon, but you've actually got to put together a team to play competitive Pokemon, and then I'm going to show you a bit how to use it with a few examples here and there. So anyway, starting off, first part, as I said, is how to build a team. So where do you begin when you actually want to make a competitive Pokemon team? Well, I always suggest to people, particularly when they're starting out, the first thing to do is think of an idea, or in other words, a core to build it around. And what is a core? A core is, generally speaking, one or two Pokemon which work really well together, which you kind of like. It might also just be a Pokemon which you think looks cool. And you're like, okay, what is the best way I can build a team around this Pokemon? And then you choose partners to support and patch up that Pokemon, or like the group of Pokemon's weaknesses, and eventually you end up with a team. And I'm going to go over how you actually do that in practice a bit in the coming half hour or so. So a Pokemon core usually consists of 2 to 3 Pokemon which work really well together and kind of complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. Might sound a bit vague, but I'll show you some examples later of what cores are and different really popular ones. So you should have a pretty good idea of how to build your own Pokemon team by the end of this. Now, if you don't know which Pokemon are viable, I mentioned this before earlier to someone as they asked a question in chat. There's a really helpful website called Pikalytics, which you can see written out there. Just Google it. It's got Pokemon usage stats, it's got damage calculator, it's even got like a team builder which will help suggest Pokemon for you to build with and suggest moves and stuff. So particularly when you're starting out, it's a really useful resource to get you going and get you familiar with some of the stuff you might not already know because you haven't played it yet. Up here I've got an image of Incineroar, and Incineroar has been both loved and hated since its release in Ultra Sun and Moon. It was crazy in 2018. It was on 80% of the teams which were played, which is insane. And since then, Game Freak has done its best to nerf it, so it's gone down. But yeah, some Pokemon are more viable than others. But if you really love a Pokemon, there's probably a way that you can make it work somehow. It might not be the best team, but it'll be a functional team. So anyway, here's an example of Pikalytics. As you can see, this was just from today, the current usage stats. You see Tapu Fini currently is on 55% of teams, which is also kind of crazy, but it's not as bad as it was in 2018. And like after like 20% usage of the top 20, you get like a huge amount of variation in this format. So you can really run a lot of different things. It's pretty cool. Tapu Fini isn't broken, it's just really consistent, and that's why it's on so many teams. But yeah, so how to build a core? Well, first you need to choose your Pokemon you want to build around. Like here I've got Tornadus Metagross, you can ignore that a bit, but that's like an example of a core. And I suggest if you want to try team building, it is really frustrating and difficult to do in-game, because you need to breed all your Pokemon, and if you find out something's wrong, you're going to have to rebreed it all. Or maybe even catch new legendaries, or whatever. And that's a lot of work, so if you go to a website called Pokémon Showdown, Pokemon Showdown, if you Google it, is actually an online simulator which allows you to just search the Pokemon and you can experiment it and also battle with them. And then once you've found a team which you like, you can get it in-game and then actually start using it in-game. And that's how a lot of VGC players practice and also go about team building. Because it's just faster. You don't have to breed them every single time. You only breed it once you feel comfortable. But yeah, so you get your Pokemon, you put them in the Pokemon Showdown builder, and then you start thinking of what their weaknesses are, and lots of cores which are successful in VGC, in competitive Pokemon, have similar patterns, and I'm going to go over a few of these in the next to help you out, to give you a bit of an idea what to be looking for. So it is ironic because there are 2 Tapu Fini on this screen, and I'll go over why in a second. You might understand a bit more why it's such a useful Pokemon. So many cores are just simply built around different types of Pokemon which complement each other really well. And 2 really common reoccurring themes across all formats this remains viable are Grass, Fire, Water, just 3 Pokemon which fulfill those types, and the Fantasy core, which is Dragon, Fairy and Steel, and I'll explain why in a second. So now, Grass types are weak to Fire, Bug and Flying. Now, neither water or fire resist flying, but bug is resisted by fire, and fire is resisted by water and fire. They play tonically flirt, depending on the Pokemon. Rillaboom doesn't look like much of a flirter to me, for instance, QQ. But regardless, so then you've got like water's weaknesses. Water is weak to electric, which grass type resists, and it's weak to grass, which grass and fire resist. And fire is of course weak to water, which both grass and water resist, and weak to rock and ground types, which grass and water types are both super effective against. So as you can see, these three Pokemon are able to cover each other's weaknesses and damage their threats quite well. So it's quite a balance. You've kind of got a bit of answer to everything, and you're able to hit everything a bit neutrally, and that's why they're just so consistently found. Fire, Water, Grass is just three types that if you get three of Pokemon of those types, you've generally got the basis at the start of a pretty solid team. Now, an example of a Firegrass core, which you could see now, is Rillaboom. He's really strong. I talked about him earlier if you were around to see that. And Tapu Fini, which you just saw, is a water type. It's just very consistent. It's very strong. It just does what it's meant to do while it's just a good water type. And Rotom Heat, beyond looking like a cool oven, is just one of the best fire types at the moment, but you've also got many others to pick from. Anything really that's a fire type or water type or grass type could go there. And the other one, the Dragon Fairy Steel Core, might not be as self-explanatory, but if you think, you might not know these weaknesses off by heart, but I'm going to go over them for you. Dragon types are only weak to other dragon types, which fairies are immune to. That's useful. Ice type, which steel is resistant to. And that's all their weaknesses. And they're weak to and fairy types, which steel's also resistance to. Steel is weak to, in this case, usually fighting, which fairy's resistant to, and fire, which dragon is resistant to. And fairy types are weak to poison, which steel is immune to. And steel types, which steel also resists. So basically these Pokemon once again cover each other's weaknesses and threaten a lot of damage. Also the moves, like if you've got a dragon move, a fairy move, and a steel move, you're able to hit most other types at least neutrally. Maybe not with super effective damage, but you can do decent damage against all of them. So that's why you see this Pokemon come by a lot. Now Tapu Fini, as it's a water and a fairy type, that's why it can fit in both of these cores. And it's also why it's seen on so many teams, because it just rounds out a lot of the resistances and weaknesses that a lot of teams might have. So yeah, that's one type of core, but now you get to some slightly more interesting ones, and you might see some familiar faces here. So a lot of cores are built around abusing terrain effects, such as weather. Now, usually these consist of two Pokemon, or maybe two or more. One's a setter, and the other is an abuser. Now, the setter is there to set the terrain, or in this case, weather. And this is where the archetype of weather teams came from. So, if you've got a sun team, Torkoal has got the ability Drought, which sets the sun whenever it switches in. Now, Venusaur gets double speed in sun, can outspeed, hit hard. Charizard has an ability which boosts its special attack whenever there's sun up, so it starts hitting even harder as well. And this combo together can do a lot of damage and really threaten a lot of teams. That's why it's a pretty good core, and we'll work a little bit with it later to show you how you can build around that. But you've also got other options like Rain. Rain, you've got Politoed, has got the ability Drizzle, which sets it, and then you can have a Ludicolo. Ludicolo gets doubled speed thanks to Swift Sim, its ability, and can then also start abusing rain-boosted water-type attacks. Then you have Tyranitar. Tyranitar sets Sand, Excadrill gets double speed in Sand. You're starting to see a pattern. They can start outrunning, just dishing out a lot of damage, because remember, if you're faster, you've got an advantage. So double speed is a big deal. Now those are the main three. Sadly, Hail can be used, but it's, to put it bluntly, kind of garbage. Because there aren't many good Hail abusers. All the Pokemon which get abilities which are boosted by there being Hail aren't that good. But an example here is Ninetales Alola, which can set Hail with its ability Snow Point. And then Arctor's ult, this kind of weird looking fellow over here, he gets double speed in Hail, but he's just too weak to really pull it off. And also Ice types generally, they don't have any real resistances, and they are weak to so many things, making the Hail the weakest by far of these four weather types. But then you've also got some others. So now, as I just briefly mentioned, controlling the speed of the Pokemon battle allows you to attack before your opponent, giving you an advantage. So speed is really important. That's like, really, if you memorize that, that's going to help you so much when building teams. Find a way to boost your speed, lower their speed. Maybe even swap the speed around, as you'll see. But certain calls are built around a Pokemon which is really strong powerfully, like really powerful, but it's just got the wrong speed to it. It's too slow to outrun things. Like, what's the point in a Pokemon which does like loads of damage but it doesn't get the chance to do its attack? Like, something outruns it first and kills it. Not much you can do. And that's why you get a supportive Pokemon which helps it out. Now, Whimsicott, if you were here for the first part, gets Prankster. Somebody in the chat might want to ban the Russian bot. But yeah, anyway, so Whimsicott, as I mentioned before, if you were there for that part, has the ability Prankster, which gives all its status moves priority, meaning they always move first. So it gets a move called Tailwind, which if you're around for the first part, you'll remember, Tailwind doubles all your Pokemon speed for 3 turns. That means, if you've got a really slow Pokemon, its speed is doubled. It can outrun things, start doing a lot of damage. Dracovish is an example of such a Pokemon which is slow but can do a lot of damage, and therefore you often see it next to a Whimsicott or another Tailwind user, so that it's able to outspeed the things it wants to hit before it takes damage itself. Then you've also got Pokemon which are just too slow that even doubling their speed wouldn't be enough to have them outrun opposing Pokemon. For that you've got Trick Room, which is another special move, which means, once again, the slowest Pokemon move first, the fastest Pokemon move last. Which suddenly means the slowest Pokemon are now the fastest Pokemon. Now, Glastrier is an ice type that was released in the latest DLC, and it is, to say slightly broken would be a mild understatement, but it's just a really, really powerful ice type at the moment. One of the few good ice types at the moment, so if you're a fan of them, definitely have a look at it. But, it's a really, really, really slow Pokemon, and then you get something which sets Trick Room, and now it outspeeds things. But it's already got really good bulk, it's got really good offensive stats, so now it's a really fast Pokemon with really good offensive stats, making it really threatening under Trick Room. Trick Room is basically Uno reversed. Yep, that is correct. And now, just an example of Dracovish. So here you've got Dracovish, and who would you expect to win between Dracovish and a bulky Venusaur? Like, Venusaur's quite a thick grass type. It resists water type moves, but Dracovish doesn't care. If you give that thing a choice band, it's got a move called Vicious Rend. If you move first, for instance with Tailwind, it gets its base power doubled to 170, which is crazy for a move, and it just lets it outright one-shot things, which even resist it. And you can see how can that be threatening. You outspeed the Venusaur, thanks to the Tailwind. That's the point. The Venusaur isn't going to be there to give the big damage. That's why speed control is so important. Anyway, some further core archetypes. Finally, there are just like cores which work simply because they just do so much crazy damage, and I'm going to go over a few of them here. They're known as hyper, or just offensive cores, and revolve around just beating up your opponent as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and usually they consist of one Pokemon which does a lot of damage and another one to support it and help it out, to enable it to do that. Now, the first one is Metagross and Tornadus. Now, these are some pretty cool ideas which you might not have realised and you might be able to use in your own team building here. So Metagross has an ability called Clear Body, meaning that nothing can lower its stats. You give it a weakness policy, which means if you get hit by a super effective move, you double your attack. Now, Tornadus gets a move called, I've forgotten it, Brutal Swing, a dark type move which isn't very strong. It hits everything on the field, including yourself. So you basically use a very weak super effective move on your Metagross, double your Metagross's attack, and Metagross has a field day just cleaning up the entire field. You can then also use Tailwind, once again as mentioned before, to double your speed, and Metagross is now faster than everything, and hits harder than everything, and they can't lower your stats in turn. Slightly broken. People have thought ways to play around this, but like that's an idea of an offensive core, and if you were to pick Pokemon to support that, that can be terrifying. But there are even more fun ones. You've got this Pokemon which was introduced in Sword and Shield called Colossal, which is this coal-looking lad over here. And Colossal has an ability when hit by a fire-water type move, its speed gets quadrupled. Now, it's usually slow, but if you times anything's speed by 4 times, it's going to be pretty freaking fast. Now, Dragapult is one of the fastest Pokemon in the game, and it gets Surf. So you hit yourself with a water type move, you've suddenly quadrupled your Colossal Speed, you gave it a weakness policy like the Metagross, you've doubled your attack and special attack. You start firing off some supercharged moves at lightning speed. And somebody just asked, Batsby, does Tornado sufficient speed to outspeed Metagross? Yes, you do. And Chili Hardcore, as I'll get to, you'll see there's a beat-up strategy later on. Terrakion is just a better Lucario. But that is one which I'm going to address in a bit. Another example is Urshifu and Thundurus. These two are just two Pokemon which deal a lot of damage. Urshifu, some of you might have, if you watched the battle I played briefly in the break, saw me almost get beaten up by one. But Urshifu's ability means that it ignores Protect. If somebody clicks Protect, you just damage them anyway. And its special move, it's a Dark-type move, always critical hits, which is as broken as it sounds. Nobody quite knows what Game Freak was thinking when they released this guy. Anyway, so one way people try to control it is to intimidate it, lower its attack slightly. But Thundurus has the ability Defiant, which I mentioned in the first part too. And basically, if you lower Thundurus' stat, for instance with Intimidate, his attack goes up by 2 stages. Meaning that you can't safely lower Urshifu's stats because you're at risk of boosting the partner next to it. So together they just run rampant and just beat up a lot of things together. Then somebody in the chat was mentioning, does beat up Justified Lucario still a thing? It is, but I've got something better. You've got Terrakion, which is a pseudo-legendary type Pokemon, but it also gets the same ability as Lucario, which is called Justified. Every time this Pokemon gets hit by a Dark-type move, its attack goes up by 1 stage. It just so happens there is a Dark-type move which hits once for every Pokemon in your team. In VGC, you bring 4 Pokemon. That means it hits 4 times. You beat yourself up, you boost your attack 4 times. Your Terrakion has now got times 3 attack and starts doing a lot of damage. Whimsicott can also set Tailwind and do a bunch of other nasty trickery, so yeah, it's quite a scary duo. Now, the last one, which the people who saw me in battle use, Raichu and Moltres isn't like that offensive naturally by its stats. Like, they don't have high attack or special attack themselves. But if you give it a weakness policy, yeah, that is the move that almost beat me up. But so yeah, if you give Moltres a weakness policy, if you hit yourself with an electric type move from Raichu, you can also boost your weakness policy. And because you're bulky and with double stats, you still start doing a lot of damage. And Raichu is a Pokemon which can do a lot of nasty things like Fake Out to cause an opposing Pokemon to flinch, not be able to take a move, can use Charm to lower the enemy's attack, and a bunch of other stuff to basically keep Moltres nice and healthy as it tries to run rampant. Now, these are all examples of some calls. And you might now be able to have some own ideas of how you could maybe use a Pokemon in a team. Now, that's just like, so you've got 1, 2, or 3 Pokemon which these are pretty cool, you kind of want to build around these, but what next? And that's when you need to pick partners to help patch the weaknesses. Now remember, in VGC, competitive Pokemon, you can only bring 4 Pokemon of the 6 you have in your team to each individual battle. So you do need 4 Pokemon which can work really well together, not just an entire team of 6 which covers everything. But you should also always try to add 1 or 2 means of what's called speed control. As I was saying, moving first is such a big deal. And moves like Tailwind and Trick Room, which I went over, they were very common there. They just give you such an advantage and enable other Pokemon to do so much more that if you don't have any way to lower your opponent's speed or raise your own speed, you're at a disadvantage immediately, and that's fighting an uphill battle, so you might as well just build in a right away. And once you have your Pokemon, you need to pick the moves to fit their intended purpose team. You'll have an example of this later and how you do this. And finally, you need to try and think of ways you could beat your own team, and then think, could I maybe play around that? And if not, maybe you need to make some changes to your team, and I'll get to that too in a bit later. But anyway, here's an example. Let's take the Sun Call. Torkoal, Venusaur, and Charizard. Remember, Torkoal sets Sun, Venusaur gets double speed in Sun, Charizard gets stronger attacks in Sun. So what are we missing? What are we weak to? Firstly, we are missing speed control outside of Chlorophyll boosted Venusaur. Like I said, you want something which can raise or lower your speed or lower your opponent's speed. We don't have that with these 3. We're also weak to flying types because we have nothing to hit them super effectively. And they can hit Venusaur quite hard, and they can hit Torkoal and Charizard neutrally. weak to rock because 2 of our Pokemon are just weak to it, and Venusaur might not be able to kill them because they can be quite bulky. Dragon types just resist all our moves, so we can't hit them properly either. And fire types, well, they also just kind of resist most of our moves, so we're kind of weak to all of these. Bulky ground types carrying rock moves, most notably Landorus, could also threaten Charizard because Charizard's a flying and fire type, 4 times weak to rock moves. It's just going to kill you. So, this might sound like a lot of information, but like you've just got a team and you think, what are all the things I'm weak to? You might just open up, do a Google, check the Pokemon's weaknesses, and just see if there's something which comes up a lot. Then you can open up, for instance, Pikalytics, which I referred to earlier, and you can see if there are any like really popular Pokemon, which are any of these types. And I've done that here already, and I've listed them here, and like these are all threats, popular threats to the team which we've currently got. So Landorus, Incineroar, and Dragapult are all a bit hard for us to hit and could be a bit disruptive, like flying types like Moltres and Thundurus. Once again, it's a bit hard for us to hit them, but they can hurt us quite a lot. And rock types are just a bit hard to kill and they could just outright one-hit KO some of our fire types. So we don't like them. We need to fix or think of a solution for these, which is what we're going to do. So, how do we solve it? Well, you don't want to solve all issues at the same time because that's simply not possible. So rock types are the obvious main weakness because they can just one-hit KO us. We need something to beat them. And what's good against rock types? You can think water type moves, but we've got Sun Team, so that lowers water type moves effect. Grass type is also okay, but then we've now got 2 grass types and 2 fire types. That's not ideal. And ground type's also strong against rock. What's a really good ground type? You'd go once again to that website I pointed you to, Pikalytics, or you'd find one yourself. And you could end up with something like Landorus. Could be something else, but Landorus is a good option here. Landorus is a really good ground type that can hit all these rock types super effectively, and it gets the ability Intimidate, lowering your opponent's attack. So not only does it hit them hard, it means they do less damage to your partners. So it also beats fire types because ground also has the added bonus of beating fire, so we also just patched our Incineroar weakness, and we also weakened opposing Landorus with that Intimidate ability I just mentioned. So overall, that's a pretty good partner. We've now found our 4th partner for the team. You go on. Now we have 2 more. We still needed to beat the flying and dragon types. Now, once again, you Google what's good against flying and dragon, you might find ice. Ice beats both of them. Now, ice tends to be a pretty crappy typing, except there is one really strong ice type Pokemon, which I mentioned earlier, and that's Glastrier. So, we found a Pokemon to beat it, but Glastrier is really slow, and so is Torkoal, and we still need some speed control, so remember that move which makes the slowest Pokemon move first? Trick Room. We need a Pokemon which sets it. That's Dusclops, which is one of the cores I mentioned earlier. So you've now got 6 Pokemon together, which have now, altogether, you started with a core, and then you've added 3 Pokemon to cover its weaknesses. Now, what further? Now you need to pick their moves and abilities. So firstly, every Pokemon can have 1 to 3 abilities, and it's often not all too hard to pick between them, and if you're really unsure, once again, just go to Pikalytics. I cannot recommend that website enough, and it says the most popular ones for each Pokemon. But we wanted Torkoal to set our sun. Why not Dusknoir? Okay, I'll get into that in a second, but essentially it comes down to Dusclops' item, which I'll get to in a bit. So if you stay tuned, you'll see why. So Torkoal gets Drought. We want that to set our sun. We want Venusaur, of course, to have the ability that doubles our speed in sun. Solar Power is the ability on Charizard, which boosts our ability in sun. Landorus only gets 1 ability. That's easy. Dusclops gets 2 abilities. We'll get to that in a second. And Glastrier only gets 1 ability too. Also easy. So the only one we really need to make a decision between is Dusclops' ability. So he learns Frisk and Pressure. What Pressure does, it means that your opponent uses slightly more PP each time they click a move. And Frisk tells you, when you switch in, what your opponent's items are, what they're holding at the moment. So 1 means that if you've got a really long game, you've got a slight advantage because they're going to run out of PP to be able to click their moves. And the other gives you a bit of information at the start of the battle, so you know more and you can take more into account than your opponent can. Now, Frisk is better in double battles, because double battles tend to be quite short, and therefore PP never really tends to run out mid-game. So having extra information is just always an advantage, and that's why you'd pick that ability, for instance. That's the kind of thoughts you'd have when you're trying to figure out which abilities to give your Pokemon. Now you need to figure out your moves. So I've just gone ahead and taken like a lot of popular moves from Pikalytics. Like I just took the top 4 most popular moves for each Pokemon, and I can explain why these are popular moves for them now. And you can be thinking the same for like any other Pokemon. Each Pokemon has been given the same stab option. Now, if you missed the first part, stab means same type attack bonus. If you're a fire type and you use a fire type move, your fire type move is stronger. It's that easy. So, Torkoal has a fire type move. Venusaur has a grass and a poison type move because they're boosted. Charizard has a fire type and a flying type move. Landorus has a flying and a ground type move. And Glastrier has an ice type move. They've all got the same type attack bonus. They're just really strong attacks, stronger than usual. Now, sorry. Torkoal has been given Body Press, and we have 3 ground type coverage moves, which are Earth Power, Scorching Sands, and High Horsepower. Now, why have I done this? If you remember, the team is kind of weak to rock types, so you want to have as many moves, even on Pokemon which are weak to rock types, which can hit rock types, just so you can catch them off guard. Now, Fighting and Ground are all super effective against rock, so they're all good options to just have on your team. Just lets you occasionally kill a rock type, which was hoping to get a kill, and you kind of surprise it, catch it off guard, put it in a bad position. Landorus has been given Rock Slide to hit the flying types, because if you remember, we were weak to that. It's good to hit it, so that's useful to have. U-Turn lets it switch out and deal damage. This is more advanced play, but U-Turn has a secondary effect that when you use it, you can swap out to another Pokemon, but it lets you swap about and position yourself better in-game, but you don't need to pay all too much attention to that right now. Glastrier has Heavy Slam, and that's a Steel-type move, and when Dynamaxed, if you might have remembered from the first part, if you missed that, I'm going to go over it again, but Dynamax Steel moves give you a defense boost, so you can boost the defense of all your Pokemon. That's quite useful. If you remember, I said that Max Steel is one of the most useful moves you can have. Dusclops is our Trick Room setter, and now this is where you can get into some of the items. So you remember, I've given Glastrier a weakness policy, which I've mentioned a few times now. If you get hit by a super effective move, you double your attack. Now Dusclops can learn a rock move. Dusclops is really weak with his attack, so it doesn't do much damage to yourself. So use a rock move on your own Pokemon, your own Glastrier, your Isours, and you double your own attack. It's a pretty big boost. And Nightshade just gives a bit of chip, and if you don't know what Pain Split does, basically it heals you slightly at the cost of someone else's HP. Yawn and Sleep Powder, as you see on Talk on Venusaur, just are options to put opposing Pokemon to sleep. It's just nasty, it's quite annoying. Can come in useful every now and then. It's just, if you can, why not? And once again, if you're unsure what moves to use, just literally check Pikalytics. It's an amazing website for this, and you'll be able to learn just by literally ripping movesets off from there. Some example, like this is Landorus. These were the top 4 moves, as you can see. Also the top 4 moves which I've put on the Landorus. It says how many people use them, so you can see that 98% of Landorus, which I used in VGC, tend to run Earthquake. Anyway, now for the bit of fine-tuning. So you've got your moves, you've got your Pokemon, and now you need to create your spreads, your EV spreads. Now, for those of you that once again weren't around, EVs are points you can allocate, invest in stats to just boost certain stats any way you want to. You also need to pick a nature for your Pokemon, which if you want there, which lowers one stat by 10% and raises another by 10%. So you lower one which you don't need, and you raise one which you do. Items and EVs should, of course, fit the purpose of the Pokemon which you want in your team. Once again, I'm going to go to an example. Right, so we want Torkoal to be slow, because we want it to be fast under Trick Room, as we said. We want it to be fat, and we want it to hit hard. So we put a lot of it in HP, and we put the rest in our special attack. And we give it a nature which lowers its speed even further, because we want to be even slower, and we boost its special attack. It hits hard, takes a lot of hits, and moves very fast if we set up Trick Room with Dusclops. Exactly what we wanted. Venusaur, on the other hand, wanted to be really fast, outspeeding things in Sun with its doubled speed. So put everything in speed, and the rest in its attack. So it hits hard, moves fast. Same goes for Charizard. Then we have Landorus. Landorus, once again, moving fast, hitting hard. Dusclops doesn't need to hit things hard at all. It's not what it's there for. It's just there to set up Trick Room and kind of be a bit annoying here and there. So we put everything into bulky stats, such as HP and its special defense in this case. Glastrier, much like Torkoal, wants to be slow and hit hard, take a lot of hits. So once again, everything in HP, nothing in speed, even using a nature to lower its speed, and boosting its attack. The item choices here, I just once again took from Pikalytics. They're some of the most popular items for them. So people use Citrus Berry and Torkoal because, as I said, you want it to be bulky and live long. Citrus Berry is an item which heals your HP by a little bit when you get below 50%, which is quite useful to have. Life Orb, which I also covered earlier, it boosts your attack slightly, but you lose a little bit of HP each time you use it. But Venusaur isn't very tanky anyway, it's not there to hit hits. You just want it to hit as hard as possible. Charizard's got a Charty Berry, which is a berry which lets you live a rock-type super effective move because it halves its damage, which otherwise would kill Charizard. That's why people use it. Couldn't say why it's the most popular one at the moment, but that's what people are running. Landos 3 gets an Assault Vest, which is an item which boosts your special defense. And now somebody asked the question, why am I running Dusclops over Dusknoir? Because Dusclops is a pre-evolution of Dusknoir. That's because this item called Eviolite. Eviolite is an item which boosts the defense and special defense of a not fully evolved Pokemon by 1.5 times, which actually means that Dusclops with an Eviolite is bulkier than a Dusknoir, making it a better support Pokemon to set up our Trick Room. And finally, Glastrier has the weakness policy, which you can self-activate with the Rock Tomb on Dusclops, as I explained earlier. So, like, you've now basically, this could be used as a team for competitive Pokemon. It's quite straightforward, and if you rewatch that, you'd be able to use that yourself. Now, of course, you can make slightly more advanced EV spreads. I gave you some really quick rundown of like what you can put your EVs into, but you can go more advanced and spread them out over all your different stats. And an example of this is this Rotom Heat on the right. Now, you don't need to memorize this, but it just gives you an idea of what you can do once you've got a bit more experience. And for instance, this Rotom Heat has been calculated precisely that it can take a +1 special attack Meteor Beam from Nilego, which is a Pokemon which threatens it, a rock type. And it can also live 2 Rock Slides from a popular Pokemon called Landorus, which we have on our team, while still having enough speed to outspeed a certain Pokemon after a single speed boost or them losing 1 speed stat. Now, you can see the damage calculations on the right, and you can see that like the Nilego's got 6.3% chance to 1-hit KO you, and the Rock Slide has got 2% chance to kill you in 2 hits. This is all quite out there, but once again, Pikalytics has a damage calculator, so if you really want to experiment with this stuff, you can just go there and start messing around with your own spreads. There's a lot of creativity which you can let loose on this. Anyway, so you've got your team, and now you've got to figure out how to actually win games with it. It's all good to have a team, but how do you play Pokemon? So a common mistake a lot of newcomers will make when playing Pokemon is they're too short-sighted. You see an opportunity to get a kill, you take it, but you kind of lose track of the long game, and you end up losing as such. You need to work towards certain win conditions. Now, an example of this is sacking, which is letting one of your Pokemon faint. Early on, to get a knockout, as I just said, like you see an opportunity to get a kill, you go for it, you get the kill, you're feeling quite good. But then you realise you needed the Pokemon you just sacrificed to kill one of their threats, because your other Pokemon can't deal with it properly. When that threat hits the field, you don't have your counter to it anymore, and you're at a disadvantage. Whoops. Katana's pretty strong, yes. So yeah, Pokemon is a game about making calculated risks to try and maximise your chance of winning. And when you make plays, they need to leave you in a favourable position for the rest of the game, not just that turn. So you need to always be thinking about, how am I going to win this game, not just, can I kill a Pokemon right now, or can I live something? There's slightly more to it. So when you start off a game, I'm going to go through a pre-game with you. You see your opponent's Pokemon, not their items, not their natures, not their moves. You only see the 6 Pokemon they can use, and you know they can pick 4 of them to bring to the battle, and you can pick 4 of them to bring to the battle. So you have to choose the first 2 Pokemon you start with, because it's a double battles. I have no idea what sacking is based on. I just know it's a lingo used in competitive Pokemon, which is why I used it up. I brought it up. But so you need to first have a look, okay, what 2 Pokemon am I going to start with, and what 2 am I bringing back? Because remember, you can only bring 4 of your 6 Pokemon which you have on your team. So you have to look, what threats do they have? What threats do I have to their team? What's good against their team? And what are they likely to bring against me? And you have to be thinking about these questions and then make a decision on how you bring that. And I'm going to go over like how you do that with another one. And once you've weighed these decisions, you make your selection, you lock in, and then you get to the actual game. But you really can put yourself at an advantage or disadvantage by putting a bit of thought into which Pokemon you bring to a battle. And go over here. So let's analyze their team. See if I accidentally duplicated something there. But you see, the Pokemon top left, you might not know it, but you can take my word for it. It's a Trick Room setter like Dusclops. It can set Trick Room, make the slowest Pokemon fastest. Then you've got Dragapult, which you might have seen before. It's a Dragon type. And our only real answer to a Dragon was Glastrier. That's why we added the Ice type, so that we could hit these Dragon types. They've got their own Glastrier. Glastrier is an Ice type, it's weak to Fire, so we're going to have to bring a Fire type to this match to be able to deal with it, just in case they bring it. Tapu Fini is a Fairy and Grass type, and Water type. It's weak to Venusaur, which is Grass and Poison, so we probably need to bring Venusaur too. Torkoal, we have no real way to hit it properly, and this is an actual match which I took from online spectating, and you see they've used a similar team to we have, except instead of Landorus, they've got different Pokemon. I think this is a bad choice of them, because they don't have a way to hit the Torkoal, which is why I've written that down. So Torkoal is a threat to our team, and then finally we have Venusaur, which can hit everything on the field. So yeah, we need to bring our Ice type, just in case they bring the Dragon, so we know that. We need to bring a Fire type too, that's also given, otherwise we can't hit there, like Ice Horse. And we need to bring Venusaur. So we've already got 3 things we have to bring to this game. We need to bring a Fire type, we need to bring our Glastrier, the Ice Horse, and Venusaur. Then we think, what's the best 4th Pokemon to bring, and which Fire type should we bring? So Glastrier is quite slow, and they've got quite a fast team. You might not know this yet, but you can take my word for it. So Dusclops is pretty good there. Once again, it said you make the slow Pokemon fast, so we can use that as support. And which Fire type should we use? Charizard's quite fast, but if we're planning to go for a slow Trick Room, we should probably bring the slow Fire type, Torkoal. So now you've decided you're bringing Torkoal, Glastrier, Venusaur, and Dusclops. You've got your 4 Pokemon. You know what you're bringing. And it's that kind of thought process which helps you decide what you're going to be bringing to the game. But now you need to decide what Pokemon you start with. You know which 4, but which one are you going to throw out first? Which one are you going to throw out into the frenzy? And as I just said, we need the Fire type to kill the Ice type they have. That's non-negotiable. We have to do that. And Tapu Fini is absolutely necessary. Venusaur is absolutely necessary to kill their Tapu Fini. So our Venusaur and Torkoal are very important. We want to keep them healthy and bring them out to counter their Pokemon when they hit the field. So we should lead the other 2 Pokemon, Dusclops and Glastrier, because they're not as necessary and vital to our game plan. And that allows us to set up Trick Room right away to instantly get that speed advantage, control the speed as I said, which is so important, and then start threatening a lot of damage from our Ice Source. And that's how you would approach start of a game once you've got your own team. Now, once you're in game, how do you win? The first thing you have to do is have a look what has your opponent chosen to lead. Think about what Pokemon they've chosen to lead might look a bit scary to you. Like you think, oh, this is not a great position. They might do a lot of damage to me right now. And then you also look at yourself. Can I threaten a lot of damage onto them? Maybe even threaten to force one of them to switch out. So you have to get a general idea. You also need to have a general idea what you need to KO. So if you remember from what I just mentioned, I'm going to show the image here. We need to kill their Tapu Fini with Venusaur, and we need to kill their Ice Horse with Torkoal. So we need to keep that in mind, because if we just let Torkoal die before we've killed their Ice Horse, we're going to have a very difficult game. And lots of unexpected things can, of course, happen in a Pokemon battle. So you're often going to have to rethink, readapt your plan. So it's a lot about flexibility. But generally having an idea what you need to do will give you an advantage over people which have no idea what they're doing. And like another example of a win condition in this game is, we have a look at their team again. We've got our Ice Horse. Now if you remember, I said we need a Fire type to beat their Glastrier, the Ice Horse. If we kill their Fire type, they have nothing to kill our Ice Horse. It works both ways. So if we kill their Torkoal, focus our game around trying to kill their Torkoal, that would set us up in a position, if we keep our Glastrier healthy, to have him sweep. And that's what you'd call a win condition. So you try to play towards that. You try to accomplish that goal and then win the game. So yeah. Then how to flex on your opponent, how to make reads. This is where you start entering the more poker territory of Pokemon. So sometimes there are situations in battle where you could take a large calculated risk to try and strongly get an advantage. Now, I've set up a sample game here. Now, DSEA Scrub 2, the one with the dragon and the fighting monkey, they are threatening to KO our Dusclops here, our Trick Room setter. We really want to set Trick Room up right now, because they are faster than us. But they are also threatening to kill our Ice Horse. We don't know which one they're going to attack. Now, put yourself in their shoes. What do you want to do? Okay, so they're thinking, they see us. They see our Trick Room setter, which could make our Ice Horse slow and suddenly fast. And they're likely, we've got Protect on Glastrick. Protect's just a very common move, so they know that, like, if they try to attack our Ice Horse, we might just choose to protect it. We take no damage, we set up Trick Room, and then the turn after, we're faster, and we run rampant. So they might just completely ignore our Ice Horse, and instead try to kill the Pokemon which is going to set up Trick Room. Now, if you predict them to do that, you could just attack them anyway, take the risk that you might lose it, but you don't think they will, and that would give you the advantage. And that's where you get into poker, because now you're getting into mind games. What are they going to do? What am I going to do? And you have to... a pretty fun and enjoyable skill of Pokemon is learning how to judge your opponent's skill level and trying to get in their head and really mess with them through your plays. You always have to consider the risk, because you could do a big ballsy move, but if there's a safer option that would give you an advantage anyway, go for it. Why take a risk if you don't have to, of course? And of course you have to be aware how likely your opponent is to expect your big ballsy play. But if you get it right, you can end up winning games a lot faster, and you also can win... The higher level you get, the more reads start getting made, as you try to outwit your opponent, not just outskill. Then of course you've got the matter of hacks. When RNG gives you hell. I go by a lot of showdown names. I can give you my main one later. But yeah, sometimes RNG in Pokemon is going to cheese you. There is no way around it. There is some RNG in this game. It's going to happen. But there is always something you could usually have done better. Now, if you get RNG'd a lot, you might want to start thinking about what's going wrong. For instance, you might want to start once again thinking about speed control. I'm raising it again because it's such an important thing. If your opponent attacks first, they're the one which gets the chance to crit first, or flinch you first, or put you to sleep first. If you're asleep, dead because of a crit, or you flinched, you don't get the opportunity to RNG them back. Therefore, the person that moves first always is more likely to get lucky and cheese the opponent. It's VGC. It's not for singles. But yeah, there are some things which might be useful for singles too from this, because I'm sure there are some things which cover both as use-proof. But yeah, so this is also a disadvantage of playing slower, bulkier teams, because if you have a team which, like, the entire point of the team is you can tank a lot of hits, well, if you're taking more hits, there's a 1 in 16 chance every hit's going to be a critical hit. If you're taking 10 times more hits than any other team, you're 10 times more likely to be critical hit. That is a weakness of playing bulkier, slower teams. There you have to find a balance between trying to be faster and hitting them hard enough. Just Trick Room, bro. That's an option, yeah? But like, that's once again speed control. You always want to be the first one to attack in a game, because then you've always got the advantage, even with cheese. And also another option, some people have the tendency to pick a inaccurate move, 80% accuracy, because it's slightly more powerful, does slightly more damage. But if you think 80% accuracy, let's say you play 30 games in a tournament, that means you're going to, let's say you use that move 4 times per game, you can already see you're going to start missing that move a lot. That can cost you games in a tournament and might ultimately cost you your tournament. So even if you do less damage, sometimes it's safer to just choose a move which is more accurate. But that's your choice. If you want to be a gambler, if you want to get that chance to do the extra damage and catch someone off guard, that's your choice, and nobody's going to stop you. Here's a classic example for me. My first proper tournament was Frankfurt 2019. This was a 300-man event. I ended up making the top 8 with the team on the left, and I had won game 1, lost game 2, and all I had to do was land a Precipice Blades from Groudon, which is 85% accurate on a stack attacker. Now you can already see where this is going. If I won, I would be on to top 4. I would have gone home with a trophy and €2,000 more than I had started with. Anyway, so as you can see here, I naturally missed. I went on to also lose the game, which, as you can see from my reaction here, wasn't exactly what I'd been anticipating, and then I went on to make a bunch of like really shitty memes on Twitter about it. This is not what you're meant to do with RNG. This is a loser's mentality. I could have probably have played that game better. In hindsight, when I looked at it, there were mistakes I made. I could have played it in such a way that I was never in that situation in the first place. Even if you get cheesed, don't let it tilt you, and find out what you did wrong. So getting into some of these common mistakes, if you're not doing well and you're frustrated, it's easy to blame the losses in Pokemon on your opponents making no sense, just cheesing you, or they're just getting lucky. Truth is, although some games are lost that way, a lot of the losses are simply just because you're bad, tilted, or not playing well. They could have been prevented by playing better, or having a better team even, so never lose sight of this, and if you feel like you're just clicking buttons and you're losing, but you're getting tilted, you're getting frustrated, just stop, take a break, you're not doing yourself any good. And there's also this thing called the gambler's fallacy, which is the belief that you're owed a desired result after taking a chance repeatedly in a row. Now that sounds really complicated and technical, but basically it comes down to, for instance, if you are trying to put an opposing Pokemon to sleep with this move called Sleep Powder, 85% accurate, that's 15% chance to miss. You click it once, you miss. This happens in tournaments sometimes, live on stream, it's quite funny. You click it a second time, you miss again. You click it a third time, you missed again. You click a fourth time, and by this point you're thinking, like, I've clicked it 3 times and I've already missed. I'm going to hit now, but that's not how chance works. You've got a 15% chance to miss each time you click it. It doesn't become more likely to hit the more you miss it. You might just be incredibly unlucky, but that's not going to change. And sometimes there are safer plays you can make, which take longer, but they are safer. So don't take unnecessary risk, and definitely don't get tilted and just start clicking inaccurate moves because, like, you're in a bad mood. Now, how to become the very best? Yeah, bad luck happens occasionally, but like, remember, just you get as much as you get cheesed, you're going to cheese others as much, on average. So anyway, like, general tips on how to improve your team. I've mentioned a few times now, but Peakalytics is a really good resource for team building, regardless of your skill level. If you're struggling with team building, also don't be afraid to just steal teams. A lot of really high-level players are actually terrible at team building. They'll just steal teams from other people and play them better than the original creator. That's the thing that happens. A really good website for that is Victory Road, VGC, which has, if you have a look on it, it's got a sample team companion. It shows you a bunch of teams which have completely completed with all moves, abilities, items, spreads, just ready to use. So if you just want to get in and play right away, just literally take one, just get to know it and the how to play competitive Pokemon, really. And if you notice that a team that you have struggles against a similar thing over and over again, just take a step back and once again think, could I maybe beat that with the tools I have? Maybe do I need to change the team slightly to give me a better matchup? Or maybe do you need a new team? These are all things to take into account, and that's how you'll, over time, find a team which you enjoy, firstly, because some people enjoy certain playstyles more than others, and secondly, that which you're good at. That's the end goal. And then there's also how to improve your play. Once again, don't have a loser mentality. Always look for ways you can do better, even if you get extremely unlucky. If you get tilted throughout a tournament, you're going to lose the rest of your games. In a game of chance, you're always going to have a bad game somewhere. Expect it. Also, practice online with Pokemon Showdown or in-game through the Battle Stadium. I do recommend doing it online before getting a team in-game, because if you know a team's bad online, you can just make a new one on the spot, whereas if you get one in-game, it takes a long time to get a team in-game, unfortunately. Also, join a VGC community. If you're like really curious, just hit me up on Discord or send me a message here, and I can probably get you into the local Dutch VGC WhatsApp group. There's a decent community in the Netherlands, as I mentioned briefly before at the start, and there's plenty to be found online if you have a bit of a search, particularly on Twitter for some reason. And once coronavirus isn't a thing, also join tournaments whenever you have the time and feel like doing so. Like, it's a bunch of students and it's a great crowd, and you can meet people from all over the world that way. It's also a great way to improve, and I hopefully we'll be getting the word back from the board of DSEA to be allowed to host a tournament online in a few weeks' time for Pokemon. So you might also be able to join in with that if you stay tuned. And yeah, that was it. If you've got any questions, feel free to just ask them. So, does anyone have any questions about competitive Pokemon, me playing competitive Pokemon, or anything else? I do know Big Slim. Where do you know Big Slim from, Dr. Drax? I'm curious. I worked with him. Mount Silver, yeah. So have you might have heard of Rose Tower before, maybe. Anyway, Mount Silver worked together with me. Me and Big Slim were basically the people that ran that last year. So I've worked a fair bit with Big Slim. He's a pretty cool guy. We ran some pretty great events together, and he's also a really good tournament host. So Mount Silver is definitely a fun community to be in. Before, yeah, I started out playing online. It's definitely a good idea because it gives you a bit of an idea. But even if you know you're not going to win a tournament, it might be fun to just go to like a local event or play it online. And like, there's a lot of free online tournaments. It just gives you a bit more experience, and also it shows you what other people are using. And because of how tournaments work, you get paired against people who are of a similar level you are. So if you're losing a lot of matches, you're going to be paired against someone else who's also losing a lot. So you end up playing people which on your similar level, so you do actually learn something. And you can only use Pokemon which you catch in Sword and Shield, which I went over. No legendaries allowed. Everything's set to level 50, and you lock in your team for the entire tournament. So the 6 Pokemon you bring, those are the Pokemon you can use for the rest of the tournament. Any other questions? I study life science and technology at the moment, so I'm not actually in Delft at the moment because the first half of the year is in Leiden, because it's like a joint split study. It's a bit weird. But I'll be in Delft the second half of the year. Have any of you ever played competitive Pokemon before? I'm curious. Singles only. Yeah, I prefer doubles. Singles has a lot of switching, where basically a lot of singles revolves around predicting what your opponent's going to do, and it kind of goes on like that until somebody makes a mistake or somebody makes a really crazy play and gets it right. It's slightly too much to the poker side of things than like the kind of strategy side of things, for my opinion. I like doubles more because it's slightly more controlled. It's slightly less risk management and more strategy game on like that spectrum. I definitely find doubles more enjoyable than singles. And yeah, Diamond Pearl was a great game. I didn't play competitively back then. I think I started in Gen 7, really, playing competitively. Any other last questions? Gen 5 is a good gen. I do recommend it. It's an unpopular opinion, but it's, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, generation. Ooh, best starter. I honestly, I think it's going to be Turtwig or Mudkip. I do really like grass types though. I'm sorry, but Gen 5 is better than Gen 4. Gen 5 built on a lot of what Gen 4 set down and made it better. But I know a lot of people disagree with me on that one. Gen 1 and 2 are honestly terrible generations and were amongst the least balanced or playable. I think the main reason people enjoy them so fondly is because they're quite like nostalgic. Hey Brian Storm. Yeah, Showdown is good fun. Yeah. May I ask what format you play? If you think Gen 1 crits are the best, have you looked at Gen 1 freezes? Or Gen 1 Hyper Beam mechanics, for that matter. If you want to Google something funny. Yeah. Yeah, Gen 1 is not competitively playable. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the first World Championships was held in Gen 4. It could be Gen 3 though. Just don't quote me on that. Yeah, the Pokemon World Championships, definitely, like, if you can try to enter a few tournaments when that gets back up, it's definitely worth doing. It's a bunch of fun. Yeah, VGC is good fun. That's also what this thing was. I can recommend everyone go play VGC. It's the best format. I might be a tad biased, but I also want to see more competition in the Dutch local scene. Because yeah, like there's, as I said like earlier, there's like 40 people which are really taking it seriously, of which like 10 are like good, I would consider. So if you were to grind VGC a little, you could probably become one of the best Dutch players in a while, and that's good for your clout. It's good fun being able to say that you're one of the best Pokemon players in the Netherlands without people knowing that there's only like 15 actually good ones. At least that we know of. Some might just play online and haven't revealed themselves in like live competitions. Anyway, my time for the stream is unfortunately up. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you've got any like questions, just hit me up in the DCA Discord, which I might be linked here. I'm unsure, but otherwise just send a message on the Twitch, and I'm sure it'll find a way to me. I'll also make sure that this gets recorded and posted somewhere for people that want to rewatch this at some point. So yeah, I hope you all have a great evening. Peace out.